I try to distance myself away from all these gossips and news about some Korean celebrity getting canceled. And the reason for that is I don't want to feed any attention to this unnecessary witch hunt. Because giving it attention is like giving power to those that are feeding off of these sorts of news. And, in my country, every time a new person gets canceled, people just flock to it like scavenging, starving pigeons in the middle of Seoul City. And, whenever I see that happen, I don't really want to be a part of that. But I felt like I wanted to get something off the chest about this mass cancel culture that exists in Korea. I was planning on talking about this, but I guess today is the day. And, I'm going to try to break it down on why this cancel culture has persisted for such a long time and possibly where it comes from. And this idea of social pressure has always existed since the old days, even before the Korean government was created. But due to internet and social media and all these technological advancements, this groupthink has become somewhat of an insurmountable force within Korean society. And actually, I have a theory on this, and this story goes way back to the year of 1455. So when Korea was called Joseon and was governed by kings, there was this special system used by the bureaucracy to maintain public order and monitor the population more efficiently. And this law was called Ogajaktung. And when you translate Ogajaktung to English, it means 5 household group system. And, the name itself is quite evident. You put 5 households into one unit. And that was the law. That was the system. And there was a very clear motive behind this. The government grouped 5 neighboring households into a single unit. And the primary purpose of doing this was mutual surveillance and shared accountability. So for example, if you helped and harbored a criminal in your house for one night and was caught doing it, the entire 5 family unit was punished for your crimes. So even if the other 4 households had nothing to do with your crime, everyone was punished together. That was the whole idea of this 5 household system. And it's kind of like the Nazis executing the entire family if one member was caught helping a Jew. So, it's kind of similar, this totalitarian control. So eventually this 5 household unit law expanded into collective punishment for a variety of things, right? So for example, there was collective punishment for failing to pay taxes. There was collective punishment for inciting rebellion. There was collective punishment for practicing illegal religion like Catholicism, or theft, fleeing the town without notifying the authorities, petty crimes, and so on and so on. And imagine getting punished every time because of your neighbor, even if you did nothing wrong, right? Oh, you're gonna make sure to keep an eye on that fella, you're going to team up with the rest of your neighbors, right? The other three neighbors too. And you're also going to make sure none of them do nothing wrong, right? So for nearly 500 years, or 400 years after that, for nearly 400 years since its implementation, the Ogajaktung law maintained social order in Joseon until the nation was colonized by Japan in the year of 1910. And only after that was it abolished for good. And the reason why I share this story is because I believe that this explains a lot of the social sentiment that still exists in Korean society. There are still remnants of the past when people were socially pressured to rat each other out in order to avoid unfair treatment and unfair punishments. And we don't have such laws anymore, of course. We don't have the Ogajaktung law, but we still do hold each other accountable for their immoral actions. It's in the social atmosphere. We use morality to target a person and point fingers at them. And I think this sentimentality still exists. So nowadays, it's not just in Korea, but it's also happening in the United States or, European countries, I believe. Any misdemeanor in public is filmed on a smartphone and they're shared online to be mocked and hunted down. And, sometimes they become memes too. But the degree to which this happens in Korea seems to be much more harsher. It's much more harsh and much more frequent. So another thing is celebrities, right? Korean celebrities, their actions and words are scrutinized by the public. Every misdeed is dragged out into the spotlight to be chastised by the public. So it's kind of like a public execution, a social bullying to some extent. And the reason why this became so prevalent is because the entire mob now holds so much power due to this technological advancements, right? So the mob has the majority of the people. They have the number. So they hold the power, and the mob is the one determining what is right and wrong. And if you defy the public, then you're bound to be canceled. And this is the state that Korea is in right now. And I'm not totally against this cancel culture because, cancel culture does have its merits. We do need to shame certain behaviors and, make them public. That has a actual benefit to society. And I do accept that, doing this can sometimes be necessary for solving any kind of injustice or, giving attention to something that should require much more attention from the public than necessary. But with what's happening in Korea right now, and the frequency and the degree of cancellations and attention given to this type of mob anger, I think we have to ask ourselves a question. Is this really a healthy practice of free speech? How is it free speech when you only go after someone when everyone else is going after them? And where do we draw the line between public shaming and mass bullying? I think it's worth asking these questions, even though it's not as fun as hunting down the witch with a team of neighbors.